Welcome back to the Partnership Mastermind podcast, where we unpack what actually works in SaaS partnerships. I'm your host, Chris Lavoie. Today's guest is someone who changed the trajectory of my career. He was my boss at Gorgias, took a bet on me when I had zero partner experience, and built what became one of the most admired partner programs in all of SaaS. I'm thrilled to be joined by Phil Roireau, currently the co-founder and CEO of Consio, the hottest new CX tech in the e-commerce space. Phil has had numerous successful senior executive level stints at companies like Northbeam and ShipBob, but perhaps most famously, he was the VP of Partnerships and Biz Dev at Gorgias for over 5 years, where he helped scale the business from early stage, we're talking sub 1 million, to 30 million plus ARR, with partnerships consistently driving over 50% of net new revenue. Today, we're going to get into what made that program so special, what he's building now at Consio, and how he's approaching partner-led growth from day zero as founder. Welcome to the show, Phil.
Thank you so much for having me.
Sweet. All right, let's dive in. Now, for each guest, we start off with some softballs, some quick hitters, just to allow the audience to get to know you a little bit better. You ready for that, Phil?
Let's go.
Cool. All right, I'm going to rip these and just say whatever comes to mind. All right, first up, what was your first ever job, and what's one lesson from it you still carry?
Maybe not exactly the first one, but one of the very first job I did, my uncle had a factory repurposing industrial grade flour. And so a lot of flour would spill over the trucks when they would go on the weight balance. And the flour would immerse itself in between the little cracks on the side of the balance. And there would be about like 3 feet high under the balance of flour that would get stuck under it. And I was a person that was tasked to go clean the flour in a confined area, like 3 foot high, under an industrial balance where you would have like 50 foot, like 40 foot trucks come on. And I would have to shovel all the flour out, and then I would have to clean it, clean the whole area with like Javel, like in full hazmat suit. Those I think it's just, there's no easy job out there. And when you do that kind of job for a few times, like you just realize it's like, okay, like what do I need to do in my life to make sure that like I can go forward, and that this kind of a job, like I don't need to do all my life, because you're going to be leaving a lot on the balance if you get stuck in one of those locations. So I think that one really, I did that for a few summers. That was one of the job at that factory, and it was so hard. It was so brutal, like the Javel that would cross everything. That was a little bit of a wake up call when you're like an arrogant teenager and you're like, oh, like everything is supposed to be easy and so on, and somebody sends you in the pit. You have a little bit more humility after that.
Love that. One of the key takeaways there is every job is hard, right? And certainly now as a founder building a company from scratch, I'm sure that'll come up later in our conversation. Cool. Next up, what's something people might be surprised to learn about you outside of work?
Yeah, I mean, I just had a third kid a couple of weeks ago, and I think the same day pretty much that you had your first, but 2 months prior to that, I did a bucket list item for my 40th, and my wife let me go heli skiing just while she was basically 7 months pregnant. She was not very excited about it, but I love skiing. That's my number one passion outside of building Consio right now and my kids. And it's also something I sometimes bring some guests with, and they often come out slightly traumatized, but always a good time.
Yeah, we know a few friends you're referencing who are traumatized, and I remember we went skiing once here in Ontario to Blue Mountain, and you thought it was a bunny hill compared to some of the skiing you've done in more extravagant places. So definitely can vouch for that.
And you had the best ski of your life. It was a good time. No, it was a great day.
Sweet. All right, next up, we're going to start to get more relevant now in the business world. What's a hot take about partnerships that would most likely cause a fight on LinkedIn? And as a disclaimer, Phil does not hold back. So very interested to see what you have to say about this one, Phil.
Well, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is really there's those thought leaders that are pushing like that there's so much misconception around partner leaders, and that partnerships is misunderstood, and that C-levels don't have full buy-in of partnerships, and that like there's just like a complete lack of awareness and appreciation for the partnership jobs. And to be honest, like if you're looking at most companies, I think it's a little bit of BS. I think and that comes back to something we'll talk later. But like real partner leaders are able to get a seat at the table at every company, and they are working the ops system, and they're working their department, and they're like generating enough returns on the department, just like any other department, success, sales, whatever it is. And they are being asked to come to the table. I don't think there is like this huge misunderstanding of what a partnership leader does, and so on internally. Just a little bit less negativity and more like lifting the whole ecosystem up would be good. But I understand sometimes we need the clicks.
Yeah, no, I totally co-sign with that. I think there's a lot of excuse making still happening, a lack of accountability. And if the senior management level people are, speaking like this, then what do you think that effect will be on their ICs that they're managing, right? If all of these partner leaders, in quotations, leaders, are complaining about, lack of resources, lack of alignment, lack of investment from the C-suite, that's going to radiate down to their ICs where they'll just become an excuse-making team, right? So
Yep.
totally co-sign with that.
I mean, you just nailed it. These posts are done to like give excuses to partnership managers that are not hitting the goal, and to just go out and say that they're misunderstood, don't have the resources, and so on. That's exactly what that is.
Exactly. And later on, I'm going to ask you about your experience for having reported to CEOs for a number of years, because I think it's really important to understand from a leadership perspective what that experience is like, but we'll certainly get to that. Second last quick hitter is, what's a specific partnership motion you'd never run again?
Well, I think like your playbooks from a few years ago like are all most likely obsolete. So we ran some amazing playbooks together back at Gorgias, and I think like all of them need a refresh. Like if you're going to relaunch something today, like you need to stay up to date. So when you're hiring also an executive, like don't expect them to necessarily come in, and if they're telling you that for sure whatever they ran 2-3 years ago is still going to be the thing today that is going to drive your business forward, it's most likely like a red flag. Like everybody should have curiosity and like be nimble enough to relearn and adapt whatever they have up in their quiver in order to hit new goals. Because like things expire, what we ran during COVID, like extremely heavy webinar still works, but with like a different sauce, right? I just need to stay fresh.
Yeah, great takeaway there for the audience, which is maybe not one specific play, but just a mindset shift around not letting things get stale. And I can speak from personal experience from my last role as head of global partnerships, where I came in and, to be honest, thought I could just rip the same old playbooks, but so many variables were different, right? The familiarity within our cross-functional teams, their familiarity with partnerships like sales and customer success was way behind previous roles that I had been in. So I wasn't able to even start at the same place. And you factor in the evolution of tools, and now AI is into the mix, right? So definitely need to keep updating your playbooks. All right, last question for you, Phil, and then we'll get into the good stuff, is what's one operator in the space that more people should be learning from that you have a lot of respect for?
There's, again, we talked about top leaders, but I think most great operators are like running silent. And maybe they have team members like ICs and so on that, have a big LinkedIn playbook. But when you look around and you're like, hey, who are the leaders that are actually like really moving the needles, doing big things? Most of them are not posting on LinkedIn on a regular basis. You might be lucky to find them at some industry events and so on. So yeah, the loudest are not necessarily the ones driving the most impact. One company that I think like has done like a pretty phenomenal job on the partnership side in the last couple of years, definitely Loop. So they went above, right? Like you have a lot of companies that are good at like doing agency motion, a little bit of tech partnerships motion. But I think Loop, like they struck several like strategic partnership that were like negotiated between executives and that look almost more like a corp dev type deal that moved the needle for their company. And I think like, I want to commend them. JD Klausner as well there, like not the most vocal on social, but every time I speak to his team, seems like they have a lot of respect, and they're always making big announcements that seem to be propelling the company forward. So that's huge.
Yeah, two good calls there. I think a lot of the top killers aren't so vocal. I do think in a partnerships role, as I teach in the mastermind program, it is one of those rare roles where investing in building your network and brand can be super advantageous, but it's not a prerequisite for being a top performer. And I love the call it for Loop. One thing I appreciate about their company as a whole is that they seem fully aligned vertically on partnerships, right? Like I like how you said like more corp dev. So from the top down, everyone's kind of working in the same direction, which as you scale, certainly it becomes more challenging, but it seems like Loop's continuously hitting those milestones. All right.
Absolutely.
Sweet. All right. That was the warm up. Now we're going to get into the fun stuff. And can't start but anywhere else but the origin story of how you got into partnerships, starting with Gorgias. So let's rewind the clock, right? For Gorgias specifically, you didn't come in through a traditional partnerships path. You were actually one of their first big customers and then joined to run Growth Experience. So the first question on this is, how did that evolve into running what became one of the most influential partner programs in e-commerce B2B SaaS? And how did it all begin?
So yeah, I was for Gorgias when they were a small startup with like 4 or 5 employees. I was one of their largest, or if not largest, customer with my stores, my Shopify stores. We had a lot of fun back then, and but actually, I saw how like a small team was actually already delivering a better product than Zendesk that was publicly traded at the time. So I was like, if 5 people in a garage in San Fran can do a product that's better than a publicly traded company, these guys are most likely into something. And I built this internal conviction that was like potentially like a great company. And just a little bit like an investor mindset. I was like, okay, this CEO, I believe the space seems to be growing and there's a lot going on. So I built conviction that was like a great opportunity. So I went to actually hustle to Romain, the CEO there, to work together. And because we were running a lot of Shopify stores and driving 8-figure in revenue, I was like, hey, if we can do that for products and consumer goods, like we most likely can run ads for software and drive results. We tried to launch ads, multiple channels and everything, a little bit like but that was like, keep in mind, that was like, I don't know, like 10, almost like 9 years ago, 7 years ago, 8. So the playbooks were different, but the ads absolutely tanked. Nothing worked. We tried for like a month. Like it was just not going. But I was like, hey, this is a great product. I'm going to figure it out how to like grow this business for Romain. Back then they were like at 250K AR or something. And I found this event. Mega shout out to the team at BGS and Tanner Larson and so on. That was like an OG, like mastermind type,
OGs.
like with 300 people in the room. Everybody was flying to Reno, Nevada. And I find this event from some like guru type stuff that was happening back then. And I managed to sponsor a booth for $2,000. So we go to this event for $2,000 in Reno, Nevada. Like it came with a room or something like this. It was like, we got like an amazing deal. And there was like 250, 300 e-com entrepreneurs all in a room. And we're running like our little booth with the banner that's like barely like holding up in the back of the screen. But we had brought a couple of iPhones. And back then it was like a very hot commodity. And we just went on stage. We like hustled to get on the stage and to like shout out to everybody that like if they were creating a free account with Gorgias, would give them like free iPhones at the end of the event. And so we got like 70, 80 signups or something like this during this event. Then we filtered everybody that had just signed up based on the Alexa rank back then. So I think Alexa rank is now defunct. And we filtered out the biggest store that were on Shopify with the best Alexa rank. So they obviously had the most traffic, and that was most likely to be a big store for us. And we picked a couple of winners in the room. And we gave those iPhones, but like also at the same time, so we generated like about 50K of AR over the next couple of weeks. And so I went back to HQ to report to Romain and Alex after this event. I was like, hey guys, you're like at 250K of AR now. Trust me, in a couple of weeks from now, we're going to have close an extra 50 to 70K of AR from this event that we paid $2,000 for. Alex, he's like, I don't believe it. We'll see it if it happens, and so on. Like he had been burnt a little bit before on growth, I think, and but sure enough, it happened. So we started. So then I was like, okay, well, we found like a place that seems to work. It's events. But the thing about events, what's great is that you have so much of the ecosystem, right? And that's how it started. That's how I accidentally became a partnerships person. I showed up at events, and then I would meet all those agencies, those influencers, and those tech partners, and then out of there, more like, okay, how do we find out how to work together? So that's I stumbled into this world, and very fortunately, and it really started with events, and then like events has always been like a big parts of the playbook at every company I've been. Like Gorgias still running 350 events per year right now. I think ShipBot, when I left, we were on track. We had been at like 70 events per year before I joined, and then when I left, I think we were on track like to run over 200 a year, like, and that was like in the span of like 6-7 months, which I'm just such a believer in, like meeting people and starting there as a building block.
Yeah, thanks for that. We're going to get to some more events later on because it's definitely a hallmark of kind of your overall operational repertoire, so to speak. And that's one of my favorite stories about your origin at Gorgias was just this hustle BD mindset, right? Like it wasn't, you didn't come in hired for partnerships, but you just followed the signals ultimately and then doubled down on what was working. You abandoned something like ads, which wasn't performing. So that's a great anecdote. We're going to continue to unpack what made Gorgias' program so successful. Because as I mentioned, during Phil's tenure, they were competing for the likes of marketing for net new revenue as the number one channel across the org, driving more than 50% of top line revenue. So we're going to keep diving deeper. And when you joined, the partnership program was at level 0, right? You were hired to just do growth, focused on ads, and then shifted into events. And then you mentioned you realized, okay, the partners are actually showing up at these events. So now where we are in time is you're starting to think about partnerships. So take us to the next step in the journey where there wasn't any infrastructure and you really had to bring a brute force approach to start getting traction with actual partnership motions.
Well, yeah, that's exactly. There's 3 stages that we went through. And the first stage is just like brute force hustling. And it was just like, okay, let's scrape some random lists out of the internet, call everybody on this list, send emails, like book meetings, like, and then, go to an event, scrape the event, find people, categorize them a little bit, try to book meetings ahead. And it was just, it was just about like doing what was in front of us. And at that time, there was so much market share to grab that it was working, right? Like there was not really like Zendesk was a competitor, but they were not super active. There was some fresh. So anybody who we would talk to, they would be interested in the value prop. So, and we didn't have a lot of TAM coverage yet. So it was just like everything was greenfield. So you could just get any list out of anywhere, work like almost any process with semi-clever copy and semi-clever positioning, and you could generate some pipeline.
Amazing.
So at that stage, we were really looking also like for hustlers, right? So I'll do a little shout out to my boy Lucas, for example, who was like one of our first partner manager. And so I remember this guy was famous for just like yelling at people on trade show floors. And he yelled at this guy, Jeff, who was the CEO of Steve Madden, the president of Steve Madden back then, right? Just like, hey, from the other side of the event floor, it's like recognizes the guy. It's like, hey, Jeff, how are you doing? Get Jeff on the phone with an account executive from the floor and so on. And then like a couple of weeks later, we had Steve Madden, and for like 2-3 years, it was our biggest customer. So yeah, just like a lot of this at first to just be there, like talk to people, like, and just like hustle the place, and that would work, right? So when you have so much market share that's available to you.
Yeah, one of my favorite quotes that you consistently say is just show up, right? Like you need to show up at the right moments. And I think that's been a hallmark of the type of talent that you've looked for, which is the next question, right? So first it's just you, right? You're really just hustling, and then you have some other people come in. Let's talk about your first set of key hires, right? That really catalyzed building what went on to become one of the best partner programs in all of e-com B2B SaaS. In our prep, you said that one of your early learnings was around hiring and how sometimes experience can get in the way. So can you expand on that and then help us understand when you had your first real breakthrough full-time hire?
There was a moment where we achieved, I think, like almost stardom level of team composition. And there was actually at peak, I think it was all people that were like extremely or somewhat very tech savvy. They could all like figure out tools, but there was such like a personality element to each of them. Like, and I for on the partnership side compared to like other different like components, but like we had really special crew that were all famous in some capacity for some reason. There was something that made them like special, right? And also we had a guy that had done like Rohan that had done Big Brother here. I mean, you had just like moved across like the continent yourself to finish like a PhD in biotech. Like, and I love this because like it has nothing to do with econ, but just like shows such like an appetite to learn. We had Nicole, who was like a New York socialite in some capacity, but she had like all the connection, and for her, like she could work like 5-7 events a week, no problem, in New York, just like going around all. So yeah, it was really around like people that had like outsized personality and that they could put those and like personal achievement, and they could put that to work. We had Dylan, who had been like done like worldwide runways and things like this. So yeah, but in the back end also you need like people like Billy, for example, who was like really good at just processing the data that we were able to build, and then like which leads us maybe to like kind of the second iteration after the brute force hustling. Like you need to develop like very deep process, right? So and then what do you do with the data that you're building, and how do you activate it? So then you also like need to balance this a little bit, but yeah, happy to dive in a little bit into how we build those processes as well.
For sure. Yeah, no, all the great anecdotes, and having have lived that era, I can speak to just how exceptional people were for different reasons and how well balanced we were. And yeah, obviously an exciting time. As things scaled, one of the things that I've learned in my own career and kind of scaling programs and building up the team is it's really challenging to scale. It's not so challenging to maintain, right? I think maybe some people will agree with that, right? But it's really difficult to scale and to get more resources, right? I was talking with another guest recently where it's like, if someone said to you, hey, Phil, I need you to cut 20% of your budget, it's actually a pretty straightforward exercise if you have the experience. But if someone was to come to you and say, hey, Phil, I'm giving you 20% extra budget, what are you going to do with it? I think that's a totally different challenge. That is a lagging skill to develop as a revenue leader. So the next question for you is, how did you approach staffing and filling roles and structuring the team as things scaled as quickly as they did? Because I think that is a pretty unique challenge.
Yeah, before staffing the team, like we needed to understand like who we were selling to in the partnership world. Like obviously it's slightly different than the stores and the merchants and so on. And then like how we were approaching this motion to be continuous. But first, so the first thing that we did, like we had brute force to like maybe call it like 100 active partners that had done like a referral, and we had something that happened in the last several months. And so we actually found a way to find every single agency basically on the internet. And we scraped, like we built our own repertoire of 12,000 agencies. And then we had internally, we had like let's say call it like a data set of 100 or 200 agencies that we had experience with. And we built a scoring model and a few things to understand, like out of those 12,000 agencies in the world, like how many of them were potentially like great for us and for our TAM based on our existing experience and how much like each partner were yielding. So we organized this scoring database on like how many times they were referencing Shopify on their store. Like, were they mentioning Shopify Plus? How many employees were there? What was their location? And so on. So we built a tiering system, and then we matched like, and then we analyzed if we also put the same score and the same tier on the agencies that we're already talking to, like how much are these agencies like yielding right now, or this partner yielding, right? So like a tier 1 generates maybe like 20K a quarter of AR, a tier 2, 10, tier 3, like 3K, right? So obviously you want to find all the tier 1s around the world, and then focus on that. That's how we built like initially like our capacity blend when it was ready, when it was time to scale. So we would have like internal data that showed us how all the other agencies in the world like that had like anything to do with ecom could potentially work with us, and what was the opportunity of that market. That was a really interesting story to build, because then we could like build, okay, like on tier 1 we need like maybe 40 of those accounts per partner manager, and then like maybe tier 2 is 80, and then like tier 3 you can have 300-400 in your portfolio. So that really then helped us to understand like what kind of staffing we needed, what kind of personalities and team members we needed, because it's a different skill set to maintain 300 accounts at scale versus like being out there and being very visible in your area and with like 30 or 40 select partners.
I think one of my favorite things about that story is it actually disproves a common misconception right now, which is that partnerships as a function can't be formulaic, right? If I was to use that term, I think sales and marketing, highly formulaic, predictable input to output kind of dynamics, right? But a lot of partner programs, to your earlier comment, kind of complained with the fact that that's not true. But I think a hallmark of your career and at Gorgias certainly is this like data-driven culture where if you do track all the right things, do have the right access to data, you can reverse engineer things down to achieve quite predictable plays, and you can understand unit economics at a really sound level that makes scaling efficiently possible. So I think that's one of my favorite things about you, but certainly one of my favorite things about having worked at Gorgias during that time.
And that's the data that you bring back to the board meeting. So it's like, hey, if you're going to present to like your Series B, Series C investors, and you're like, hey, what's the opportunity? Like, how fast can we go here, and so on. Like, if we deploy to your comment, like, hey, we already had like a budget of a few $1 million. Like, what happens if we double it, right? Like, are you able to answer this question, right? So, is there like really an opportunity? So that's how we build this, and that's really stage 2 of the program. It's just like, what my TAM, like how, like what should it yield, like if we have like maximum coverage, like how do we achieve maximum coverage, and then that's really an important story to be able to tell to your management, right? So that's if you get that, you'll get everything.
Love that. Segues nicely into the next kind of topic, which is just getting deeper into the specific plays. You give a high level holistic approach of, hey, like map the TAM, you have as much data as possible and make it easier for yourself to kind of pinpoint an approach and how to approach staffing and resourcing. Let's get more specific into the nuance of the actual plays that you ran. Of everything that you had tested, say at Gorgias, what specific partner plays or programs do you most remember as being a consistent pipeline driver?
There's a couple, but I think if you're finishing at the second stage, right, you're like, okay, I know I have so many partners. Here's my bucket of partners. They're all assigned to a partner manager or to a potential expansion role. And now you're like, okay, I'm going to put like a target on tier 1. We should be talking to them, like have like some touch point with them that is not like just like an automated newsletter or something, but like either we meet them somewhere or send them a special message or something every month, right? And then like on tier 2, maybe it's like, yeah, we should like every 2 months, and maybe tier 3 is like once a quarter, we should have like a touch point. The problem is on partnerships compared to sales, and is that you're running out of content really quickly. It's like, what the heck do you keep telling this person that you need to talk to every single month? So that's where like a little bit it gets really crafty, and I think that's the most interesting part of the job. It's like, okay, you have all these beautiful dashboards, you want to talk to everybody, but then what do you tell them on this ongoing basis? And it's not only about that; it's like, how do you keep delivering value in your ecosystem, like on such a regular cadence? And that's where like the plays, one of which we developed together that we had some insights before, but like the priority contact outreach, and then there's also a lot of events plays and partner marketing plays and so on, that just like make sure that you can keep those like engagement metrics with fresh content and fresh things to provide to your ecosystem, because like you need to provide like 3-4 times more value than you're asking for them to generate, right? Like if you're asking for leads once a quarter, great, but like, did you create mechanism for them to grow their business like already 3 times in the last 2 months for them? Like if they feel that you've done that, then obviously it's going to be an easy conversation. But yeah, I think one of my favorite that we're still like a lot of companies now are running in some capacity is definitely the priority contact outreach playbook, aka PCO, and which really we pioneered a little bit of AI before it was a thing. Like 5 years ago, we would create AI generated videos. Well, it was like most of the video was generated by human, but just like the personalization token at the beginning of saying like, hey Chris, how are you doing, and so on.
Deep fake.
Way before AI was a thing. So we could like talk to everybody that was at Shopify, and send them like custom videos for every Shopify employees that was calling out directly their name, maybe like even the type of job that they were. So we're able to really segment like our campaigns by type of partners, by partners, or by sub specialty within the partner, and then also have personalization token. And at the time, that was really a little bit groundbreaking. It required a lot of efforts to generate, but like the first few times that we ran this, like I know Shopify was like, wow, what is this like that you guys are doing here? Like emailing us, sending us videos that are calling us out directly. Like, did you record a video for me? Really? Like, I met you once, like 2 years ago. Am I that important? Oh, yes, you are. So yeah, I think that playbook, and then that was really helping, keeping our engagement metric like healthy, right? It's like, okay, how often do we contact those people? Well, one of the great way that we did that with was this priority contact playbook, right? So people, and then that was really interesting because we would have the imagine a pipeline at the company level, but we would have a pipeline at the individual contributor level. So just that, like,
Customer facing.
right, for anybody that's customer facing in a partner organization, like, are they engaged? Did they already refer? Are they a champion? So we would have like 3-4 stages of relationship with individual people at companies. And that gets like very granular, but just like then you can filter out all of your champions, right? The ones that are like diehard because, you made them money, you send them leads and they sent you a lot and they made money. So, you could filter this out and then just like really build like an army of people that would advocate for you and engage with those people slightly differently as well.
Yeah, no, thanks for sharing that. And just to restate for the audience, in case you're not familiar with the PCO playbook, I mean, effectively, you're, if you're in a traditional referral type relationship with a partner, whoever that might be, the individuals who refer these deals to you are, customer facing reps. And so, it's very easy to scrape a LinkedIn directory or use other tools to map the TAM, so to speak, of those customer facing reps, put them into a database or into your CRM even, and then literally build a funnel or a pipeline, no different than your sales pipeline or your partner pipeline, but now it's an individual pipeline. And then you're literally nurturing them, backed with automation to get them engaged on a meeting, and then try to nurture the relationship to extract leads from them, and then try to nurture those leads to close to turn them into VIPs. So a very systematic sales-oriented approach, which is what worked with us. And I think that's one of the best things that you did as a leader for our team was implement data systems to make accountability easy. So you didn't use the word SLA when you were describing kind of touch points and engagement, but we were strict on SLAs. And if you had 50 VIP reps, then you had no excuse not to have, maintain a 7-day SLA, for example, right? So I think that is the job of a leader like yourself is, okay, if I'm going to ask you to do these things, at least I'm going to implement systems, reporting, data, et cetera, to make it easy for you to see what to do, right? But the job is on that IC, obviously, to execute.
Yeah, you can expect your team to achieve those things without without the right data set to support it, right? And most of it, to be fair, like with HubSpot, couple of properties, like even native reporting, you can get 90% of the way there. You don't need like very fancy ops or anything. You just need to like roll up your sleeves a little bit and you can definitely achieve a lot.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we could spend a whole hour on, something I believe is holding a lot of companies back, which is having, access to the RevOps data reporting siloed complete with ops. And I know for like large publicly traded companies, that's a more delicate thing. But if you're not enabling and trying to find top talented, leader level people who can manipulate and create their own dashboards and reporting, you're at a serious disadvantage, right? For many reasons, but I digress. Now let's switch gears a bit. You didn't just play a heavy hand in the pure partnerships function at Gorgias. You also single-handedly spearheaded creating what is now a household name in e-commerce, D2CX, the number one media platform for customer experience, which, as you mentioned, has now hosted thousands of offline and online events since its inception, driving tens of millions of revenue both directly and indirectly. And you even personally interviewed people like Seth Godin and Gary Vee. Now, most BD and partnership executives wouldn't have wanted to own events in partner marketing. You typically see a 50-50 split, but you've always seen events and partnerships as going hand in hand. So the next question for you is to explain to the audience and walk us through the development of D2CX from ideation to becoming the number one in the market.
There was a couple of factors at the beginning of COVID. For some reason, like Shopify had always held all those Shopify meetups worldwide. But for some reason, like they were pulling back and we were seeing that there was less Shopify meetups. They were not sponsoring as aggressively. And basically like agencies were left on their own to organize their events. And there was not like this centralized like force that was gathering people together. And the other thing, so there's a lot of companies that were like organizing meetups, but it was always about like putting their name forward. So there was like I had this impression that's like, I think that is clearly validated, is that other companies don't necessarily want to promote your company. So if you're putting a Gorgias event or a Klaviyo event, it's like, unless you're achieving like unbelievable like fame and status like Shopify and Klaviyo, if you're smaller tier 2, tier 3 app that's coming up and you're like, hey, like agency Y, like just like promote my event that has my company on it and it's the name of my company. So I was really believing that people wouldn't want to aggressively put their CRM power behind promoting Gorgias's branded events. And the goal was to actually like have like the biggest online community for e-commerce, or at least the specifically around like virtual events at first. And so we created like a brand that was completely standalone. And we're like, okay, if Gorgias is like a customer service tool, like we need to go and talk about everything customer experience. So DTCX was born from the need to like add a layer of content and thought leadership on top of customer service, in which like customer service nested itself. And so we could also loop in other partners that all like remotely or very directly like are within the customer experience journey, which like can encompass basically like everything in e-commerce. So we thought that by building this brand, we had enough partnership cloud that like we could get like almost any company to promote DTCX. So that was really a good play, because like every other company would promote the TCX, and then like obviously we were still like at the end of the day kind of holding the data. So we're like, hey, like if we do an online event with like 1,000 people and we have like 5 other partners that are promoting it, then at the end of the day it's still like it's populating our CRM. So I think that was really a strong moment where, and then like it scaled. The other thing that it started was in a board meeting. We were already maybe running like close to 200 events a year. And but there was like, that's everywhere. In APAC, we had people, like in Europe, we had people in all across the US, like online dinners, like trade shows, and some experiences. And but like we could just not find any more events. So like we maxed out e-commerce events. Like we were doing all of them. So we needed to increase the number of events that we were doing, and there was no more events. So, and then at the same time, there was this gap that was being left by Shopify kind of exiting a little bit the meetup space. So we created an event brand that we felt people would, other partners would be able to get behind and promote, so they would scale a little bit more aggressively than just promoting ourselves.
It's a great story, definitely worth studying for any CEO or GTM revenue leader in modern SaaS, because it's certainly a scalable playbook. And notwithstanding the value for customers, which is always the goal, I always love that playbook and strategy, because it really is a Trojan horse way of getting access to your partners' customers. Let's zoom in on tech partnerships specifically, where huge customer base. I think that's one of the key value props of tech partnerships, is these companies have thousands, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of customers. But referral relationships with ISVs are extremely difficult, right? If you go to Klaviyo, and I love Klaviyo, many friends at Klaviyo, and say, hey, can you give me one referral in the next week? But that's tough, man, right? But if I say, hey, can you drive 150 RSVPs to my next webinar? They're like, no problem, one email, right? And it's like, okay. And if you have a strong outbound strategy, which you have built yourself, Phil, well, then you're going to get this great list, right, of data and contacts from Klaviyo's customers that you can then leverage in outbound sequencing, which you would, of course, reference Klaviyo in those email flows to make it seem like you're buddy-buddy, which you are, right? So point here is, I always thought of it as a Trojan horse way for penetrating your tech partners' customer walls, because it's really difficult to stamp the referral relationships, but the co-marketing is by far one of the strongest plays you have.
That's a great point. But Klaviyo also, like, yes, they won't do like a referral easily, but they might, on the co-marketing side, they might not also co-market your event very easily. And that's why, like, by getting, like, we're like, okay, well, we know Klaviyo and Shopify are going to be hard to get to promote this event. But what if we get like a Harley Finkelstein to open? What if we get like Gary Vee or Seth Godin or whoever? Like, if we get like top tier,
Has to be premium.
top tier speakers, then like everybody's going to want to get behind it and associate their brand with it. And once they associate their brand with it, like everybody else is going to like just going to create like a flow of people that are interested in participating. And still to this day, I still have access. Don't tell anyone, but I still have access to the LinkedIn pages of DTCX and things like this that are not my property. But I'm still like in those. And I still see people like that are reaching back in, like they're kind of like semi-famous speakers and thought leaders, and they're reaching in. They're like, "Hey, how do I get on the next like DTCX webinar?" And so on. So it still like has that cloud where people are just like converging to it, and then like obviously it brings a lot of benefits.
Yeah, it's a good point there, the need for the premium experience to attract the big players. And I think that's what separates someone like yourself with a growth mindset versus the people who can't get there, is you understand the value of saying, you know what, I'm willing to spend 25 to 50K for a signature keynote speaker because of the downstream effects and outputs I'm going to get, right? Whereas a new timer, they would look at that 25 to 50K bill and be like, no chance I can do this, right? So it's a different mindset you have, right? Sometimes it doesn't work. But I think that's the key, is you have to be able to have a vision towards the future of, okay, yeah, right now spending this money might not make the board or the founders look, super happy, but I know what this can lead to.
I mean, those were big bets. Like when you're like spending like 25K and up for a speaker for a virtual event, not even like the person is not even showing up in person.
For a Series B company. Yeah.
That was like, oh man, yeah. You're like, okay, maybe we're chewing a little bit too big here, but yeah, that was a lot of fun, except paying the bill at the end.
It worked. Cool. All right, well, we're going to finish off our last segment by switching gears now. So that was a fantastic breakdown of everything you built at Gorgias. Now we're going to talk about how you went from operator to CEO and building Consio. So you're not just running a partner program, you're building the whole company, and you're doing it with partnerships baked into DNA. So first things first, tell us about Consio. What's the product, and why is now the right time to bring it to market?
That's awesome. Well, Consio, we had the idea for it a year ago, with all the development in voice LLM. We thought that it would be a great time to start automating a lot of the phone operations that happen in e-commerce, mostly on like outbound motions for e-commerce, which didn't really exist. And so that was the initial idea. Today, a year after this idea happened, with my partner, Martin, who was also the founding engineer at Gorgias back in the days, we operate like a phone platform specifically built for e-commerce. Our mission is for every merchant to have a Consio phone number, not necessarily displayed on their website, but like they can do like some targeted like outbound messaging campaign via phone to their customer, maybe have like an inbound phone AI agent that field a lot of the questions and all of this, and like a UI that's like allowing the reps to be extremely effective at driving new sales. So that's what we're building today. We want like every merchant to have a Consio number and operate all of their phone workflows from it.
Yeah.
There was no, and there was a little bit like the Gorgias Playbook was the vertical help desk for e-commerce. Like there was a Zendesk, Freshdesk, and so on, but they were all horizontal solutions. And in the same way, like there are several great phone platform that are more horizontal and touching a lot of industries like AirCall, Dialpad, TalkDesk, and several dialers as well that are more focused on B2B segments. But we're like, hey, we're like, commerce is a huge market. There's still a lot of phone, like especially for higher average order value, a lot of phone operations that are happening. And there's an opportunity where most e-commerce are unfamiliar that they can actually just call their customer to close a sale on the phone. So there's a whole playbook that's a little bit more like Klaviyo or SMS ish that can embed itself in this phone platform in order to drive new revenue for the store. So that's what we're doing today.
Amazing. Yeah. I mean, it's been amazing to see it get built up from ground zero and see how quickly traction's been built. And it's a totally great use case. And candidly, I was pretty clear in the beginning. I was like, I don't know how receptive end consumers will be to getting phone calls, but certainly I was dead wrong about that. And then I think it's also a nice timing in the market where kind of AI voice, and you have real humans calling, which is even better, but AI voice is becoming something the consumers in the market are getting more used to with the preponderance of AI technology. So it seems like right timing, and you're threading the needle there, which is great. Let's talk about how partnerships is going to play a role in your GTM, right? You're activating BPOs, agencies, tech partners. Tell us, how are you thinking about building an ecosystem from scratch?
I mean, the first thing there, we're lucky because we already did the exercise and talked about it, but there's hundreds, if not thousands, of agencies that are offering retention marketing services to e-commerce brands, and a lot of those services like are becoming a little bit more commoditized. So there's this bucket of retention agencies that offer email and SMS marketing services most likely, and sometime like another layer of service, but that's the core. So we're coming in and we're like, hey, yes, you've been doing email and SMS, but now there's a new layer. You can like actually activate phone sales for your brands, and here are the results for brands in the vertical of your customers. And there is a few inputs that the agency can provide in order to help them be successful. Like we started doing influencer voicemail drop, for example, and like there's different workflows and segments building that happen before launching a campaign. So it falls directly in a skill set that they're familiar, but there are new services and new layers of touch points in the e-commerce journey that they haven't tested yet. So I think like leveraging what's already out there and adding a layer that's as efficient as SMS marketing for them is potentially like a great upside for e-commerce, but then like for retention agencies. But you mentioned like the ecosystem, so yeah, I think one place now in the era of AI, it's more like there's such insights that are gathered like with those conversations. So, and soon those conversations will be analyzed by AI, and inbound calls will be all handled by an AI agent, right? There's no more IVR and so on. But it's like, what are the insights that are gathered by those conversations and that can take action or initiate workflows and other tools that are in the e-commerce stack through an MCP? So that's really where, like, I think in the next like 6-12 months, like the ecosystem needs to be built around. It's not like it's kind of your traditional tech partnerships, but just like that next layer of agentic commerce. So it's like, how can we be the nod for voice in the agentic commerce? And then like really start building like tech partnerships around that and go to market motions.
Yeah, no, I love that. Yeah, I think integration, interoperability of data across systems and tools is going to be, it's always important, right, for any great point solution, but especially now where the more personalization power that you can get from having all of that data is going to be key. Last question, and we'll get you out on this. We'd be interested to know, is there anything different about how you're approaching partnerships this time as a founder versus as an exec? As an exec, you do have a budget, which you are held accountable to, sure, right? But it's not your blood, sweat, and tears and your financing, so to speak, on the line. So curious, anything different about how you're approaching it as a founder versus as an executive?
I mean, it's really the weight of the payroll or the weight of the P&L, if you want. Like, so as you said, like right now, to be honest, like even spending like $10K to go to get a booth at like a nice event, like I'm a little bit wary right now. Also I think it's just like a function of the ZERP era that happened during COVID, where it seemed like there was unlimited amount of capital and there was unlimited amount of growth. Right now, I think I'm just so much more cautious on the way that we approach budgeting, and it's because I feel maybe like a slightly bigger responsibility with the L column on the P&L this time. So yeah, really trying to be cautious on how we approach spending, and where like before we might be sending like champagne bottles everywhere and so on. Now I'm trying to like, okay, like, how do we create things that are like so like a lot of the value is in the product for the folks and the workflows and everything. Like, so a little bit less brute forcing through like money hustling and a little bit more like product value driven, if you want.
I would love to show this clip to Phil vis-a-vis 2021 during the peak. I don't think he'd believe that this is an actual audio recording of Phil. He probably thought it was AI generated.
But it was a good time. It was a great time. Best of times.
Definitely. Cool. All right, Phil, before we let you go, where should people go to learn more about Consio and to follow your journey?
Easy. Consio.ai, consio.ai, or add me on LinkedIn.
Amazing. Cool. Well, this is incredible. Hearing how you scaled at Gorgias and how you're now building something net new from scratch. Certainly amazing for our audience. Appreciate everything you've done for the ecosystem and certainly for myself. Thanks so much for joining us, Phil.
All right. Have a great day, Chris.